Just talking to fill space here. Maybe I'll sing, but you'll be happier if I don't. Almost ready. Okay, we are ready to go. Thank you for taking the time to join us this evening for our June monthly meeting of the La Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club. It is Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021. I am Mitch Wagner. I am VP Communications for the La Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club. We have a fantastic lineup this evening. We're going to start with Judy Key, educator and policy expert, recently appointed by Mayor Todd Gloria to the San Diego Asian Pacific Islander Advisory Group. She's going to talk about the intersectionality of racism and misogyny. We're also going to hear from Matthew Brown, Associate Director of Law Enforcement Initiatives and Community Security for the Anti-Defamation League. We're going to talk about extremism, both in the county and in the country. And then we're going to switch gears to talk with Peter Anderson from the Sierra Club San Diego, who's going to speak about climate change globally, nationally, and right here in San Diego, and what we can and should be doing to mitigate the danger. And also, we're going to hear from Andrea Beth Damsky, who's going to talk about the work the La Mesa Environmental Sustainability Commission is doing. We've got other speakers too, but you're going to have to stick around to hear about those. As always, we are streaming this on our YouTube channel. So if you have friends or family who can't make it tonight on Zoom, or you experience technical difficulties and you have to leave us, you can watch on that YouTube channel. Just search for La Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club on YouTube. That's how my wife watches the meeting. Hi, Julie. If you have anything you need to bring to our attention, or you notice any technical problem or anybody disrupting the meeting, please message either of my two board colleagues, Evelyn Andrade and Katie Seghetti, or message me. So let's begin. We're going to start by hearing from valued board member and past president, Linda Armacost. Thank you, Linda. I'm going to unmute you now and give you the power of speech. Okay, I've asked you to unmute. Oh, you are still muted. There you go. All right. Or not. We're all very good at Zoom here. We're experts. All right, there you go.
A pop-up.
All right, you're good.
Pop-up thing. Okay, here we go. Thank you so much, for joining us. I wanted to take a couple minutes to brag about our club and our board members. We've been meeting on Zoom since April of last year, and thanks to particularly Mitch and his technical wizardry, we've been able to connect, keep going. We are averaging almost 100 people per meeting on Zoom. That's amazing. And that's not even counting the YouTube. So kudos to Mitch. Kudos, we talked about Sean Quintal, who Laws and Legislation VP has now jumped in and helped with the writing. Jean Mullally seamlessly took over for Pat. Chris Pearson, we have the best political strategist in the county, particularly East County. Our membership chair, Katie, has done a wonderful job, all of our board members. And I just can't say enough about this dynamic, wonderful group that your club has. So I want to congratulate them and say kudos to all of them. And the other thing we're going to talk about, and this is thanks to Sharon Cox, another fabulous board member who not only is a champion of the resolution to stop the cottonwood sand mining initiative, she was also responsible for us getting another wonderful board member, Professor Rick Epps, and his experience and knowledge is invaluable. So thanks to Sharon. Have you all, hopefully, you've all had a chance to read the resolution. I know Mitch sent the link out at least 5 or 6 times. So if you didn't read it, I don't know what to say. But basically, it's bad for the environment, bad for the community, bad for everybody. So Sharon Cox and Steve Houlihan, I believe, have co-sponsored the resolution. And at our board meeting, we adopted, or we sent it forward to the membership, to you, to also sign on to this resolution. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to support the resolution that stops the Cottonwood Sand Mining Initiative. I don't know how to do that, if you could raise your hand or, okay, so Bill Honhorst has accepted, and I need a second.
Second.
And Mitch seconded. All in favor?
Raise your hands if you're in favor with the raise hand button.
All right. Opposed? No. So the motion is passed. Yay, congratulations and thank you.
All right. So I wanted to ask you something, Linda, if you're done with your section there.
Sure.
Actually, Tina asked me to ask you, live meetings, when can we all see each other in person? And as a New Yorker, I don't like to hug.
I didn't want to rain on Tina's announcement, but maybe August if things go right, but for sure, see you in September. So it's going to be September, as far as we know. It's going to be a huge event. And what are we calling it? I forget. We had a name for it.
I think we're calling it September. That's,
well, that the reopening, whatever. So September, we get to see everybody. It's going to be awesome. And that's, like I said, maybe August, but for sure September. And I can't wait. It's going to be so good to see everybody and hug everybody. And yes.
Well, I'm from New York. I don't hugging, instead of hugging, I just go, how you doing? So.
Well, I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to touch. I'm a hugger. So
yes. All right.
You can, say no, that's okay.
Hug the hand. All right. Anything else, Linda?
Other than, again, just, our board members, we've got Evelyn, you mentioned, who not only is a board member, but the vice chair of the East Area Caucus. And Sharon Cox, who I mentioned, Rick Epps, and he has been doing double duty with a community college board and us. So now we have him for this summer, which is great. Our buddy Steve Yashanka couldn't be here tonight because he has a funeral, but he is our special events chair, and he's awesome. If you need phone calls made, signs put up, doors knocked on, Steve is your guy. Meryl Perry is a fabulous volunteer on the phone doing stuff. She's also been gracious enough to be our acting secretary because we need a secretary. Our previous secretary decided to start 2 businesses during the pandemic, so she's kind of busy. The secretary is a very important job. Very important job. People don't understand that. And then we have, I should go through all these people, make sure. And Cheryl Robertson, who is not only a wonderful board member, but also a liaison and a teacher and on the school board. So again, you have a wonderful board. You should be very, very, very pleased. And I just want to thank them all because they're wonderful. Yay.
Thank you, Linda. And I just want to echo that. The entire board is fantastic, and the entire board and many of our members too, and our speakers are behind these meetings. I always like to emphasize that because I know my pretty face is the face of the meeting, but I don't ever want to take credit for what goes on here. All right, let's move on. Our first speakers are actually Suzanne Till and possibly Mark Brasic, who have some important important information to bring to the club's attention. So I'm gonna, there we go, Suzanne's unmuted.
Okay, thank you.
Suzanne.
I'm gonna go ahead and share screen real quick.
Yes.
So here we go. Come here, share. And let me move this over for you guys. All right, so just a quick announcement. This map shows us a project that Helix Water District, City of El Cajon, and Helix Water and Padre Dam Municipal Water District, which I'm a board member on, And Mark Grasick may pop in. I don't know. I think he thought we would go at the end of the meeting. That we are working on. What we are going to do is take 15 million gallons a day and repurify that water. And this will be a local supply source that is ours. We can control. We don't have to worry about the Colorado River. We don't have to worry about what's going on in Northern California. We don't have to have desalinated water, which is 3 times the cost of Colorado River water. And we are getting a substantial amount of funding from the Biden administration, $387 million that is coming in for this project. There will be a formal ceremony of receiving the funding Friday, June 4th at 10 a.m. at Santee Lakes. It's actually at our repurification site at Santee Lakes. And initially, not one Democrat was invited to this ceremony. I don't know where you are, Jack, but I know Jack is going. Is that correct, Jack? You there? So Jack emailed me today that he is going. Mark Grasick wants to go, but he hasn't been invited. And I've been invited, but I can't go because my boss won't let me go. We asked Sarah Jacob, no answer. And we just really think the Democrats need to be there because this is from the Democrats. So anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there. Maybe this is something we can possibly put on the line to work with this club and East Area Caucus to get a resolution supporting this and getting this sent up to Gavin Newsom, because there is also proposals for $5.1 billion coming down for drought and water infrastructure. And we should be getting the funding. This is, and when we talk about climate change at this meeting, I'll be on, there he goes. Yes, I will be attending. Thank you, Jack. When we talk about climate change, we're at the forefront of climate change. So if you want to make a difference, this is my pitch, run for a water board or city council when it's associated with climate change, because you are right on the front lines and making a huge difference. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly, but it's happening very quickly right now. Colorado River is at 36% discharge rate. So I just thank you very much. I love you guys. I just wanted to throw that out there. If I'll put my email there if you want to talk to me, and I could send you the information of the funding and the project website, and that's about it.
So, Suzanne, how can local people on water boards make a difference on climate change? What's the connection there?
Well, number one, number one. There's quite a bit. Right now it's happening. Urban Water Management Plan. All right. And yeah, it's this Friday at 10 o'clock, Santee Lakes. Right now, the County Water Authority and the water districts are overestimating how much water they need to provide in the next 10 to 20 years on purpose, because all they want to do is supply expensive desal water. And desal is pumping out very power intensive and greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the first thing, is we've got to stop this pipeline of water coming in. If Carlsbad wants expensive water, that's where the plant is, great, but no, not on my watch. Number two is the Colorado River discharges are dramatically decreasing. I mean, we're down to 30%, and we're going to be in trouble with that. And we have to come up with a source of water here locally. Same with Northern California. I don't know if you heard, the snowpack this year is at 3%. They didn't even do a snowpack study. It's so bad. So This is locally controlled. This uses much less energy than desal. And on top of it, we're also looking at the possibility of generating energy with this through methane and natural gas to power this whole system. So, you know, kudos to those people. This thing has been in, you know, at least a decade in the making. It's been very difficult to get funding. The environmental community, Surfrider, is 100% behind it. Coastkeeper is 100% behind it. Everybody is. It's not the sexiest thing with climate change, but we make a big difference down here if we do the right thing.
So how does the water supply lead to energy generation through methane and natural gas?
I only saw the initial plans last week. I can send you the slides on it. again, it was an initial proposal. They're just
Mhm.
now looking at it. But again, that's our big problem out here is we are like 50 to 70% dependent on imported water. I'll be honest with you, County Water Authority wants us to be on desal. The other problem with desal, I don't know how they got around it, but that desal plant is owned by a company in Scotland who doesn't care about us.
Yeah.
And so that is why it's so important that we move forward on this project. This is our contribution to climate change, you know, and instead of sending that water out the Point Loma plant untreated, that's another thing on top of that. We are ready to go with construction in 2022. City of San Diego has pure water. If they're lucky, between 2030 or 2034, they might. We, believe it or not, in East County are setting the trend. And because we're construction ready, we're getting these infrastructure funds. Nobody else is construction ready. We are. So again, kudos to the people who worked on it out here. Kudos to the Biden administration for supporting us. And that's why we're getting the money. This helps fight climate change. When you import water too, you also use greenhouse gas emissions, especially for moving them over mountains, especially from Northern California. Colorado River isn't as bad. They use a lot of gravity. And when you import water, you lose a lot of water in storage in reservoirs. Think of Lake Mead. So there's my spiel. I could do a whole presentation in another day. So thank you very much.
And as Linda pointed out before our meeting started, this latest hijinks by the Republicans is a local version of what they're doing on a national scale. They oppose Democratic aid, and then when it's forced on them, they claim credit for it, which is like, oh God. It's like the guy at work who sits on his butt and does nothing and then leaps to his feet and grabs a shovel when the boss shows up. It's just contemptible. Anyway, thank you very much for speaking with us, Suzanne. So we're going to go to the next part of our meeting. We're going to hear from Judy Key. Judy, are you there? Are you ready for us?
Muting.
You are unmuted. Hello.
Yes. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Good, good. Start by introducing yourself, please.
Okay, yes. Let me do this first. Sorry.
No, we're good. Technical difficulties happen.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you for inviting me to share my experience with you today. I see some pretty familiar faces. Linda Armacost, she and I got together in 2003 to help the UCSD students with the peace rally. And then I see Mary Bigelow Tom, she was our counselor at Wangenheim Middle School when I was a science teacher there. So, and you know, and a few other people, but those two I've known for the longest in this club. I'm an immigrant from Hong Kong, and I've lived in the United States since 1974. And I can tell you anti-Asian racism is definitely not a new phenomenon. I have experienced over 4 decades of it. Just as I think we're making good progress and becoming a more enlightened society, we take a giant step backwards. So let me just tell you my role in for my outreach on behalf of my communities. When I became a commissioner on the California Commission on Asian Pacific Islander American Affairs, I swore an oath to elevate the political, economic, and social issues of AAPIs. So just because I termed out by choice in 2016 does not mean I stopped. And as founder of the AAPI Democratic Club in San Diego in 2012, our main mission is to support AAPI Democrats running for elected or appointed office. And right now I've been appointed to serve on Mayor Todd Gloria's API advisory group, and our focus is to assist in guiding Mayor Gloria's administration in tackling the unique challenges facing AAPI communities. Prejudice against Asian Americans have deep roots in our country's history. To quote Congressman Ted Lieu, when Americans become fearful, they lash out and find someone to scapegoat. The Stop AAPI Hate website have now, since the pandemic, has now 6,600 plus hate crimes and hate incidents reported. And we know due to language barriers and a number of reasons that it is really underreporting. But the number actually shot up once we started making noise and having national attention. So people are now coming out to report. Now, you all know the current explosion of hate incidents and hate crimes against AAPIs is a consequence of the pandemic's heavy toll on our society, fueled by the hateful rhetoric of you-know-who. I won't say his name. In our conversation of racism today, I'm going to discuss the intersectionality of racism and misogyny and how it threatens the safety of Asian American women. I have enough to write a book about, and I carry pepper spray. So over 60% of the recent hate incidents and hate crimes are targeted at women. So if I were to really do a good timeline, I would have 40 points on this, but we don't have like a semester to do a course. So this is a partial history of anti-Asian racism in the US, okay? Chinese laborers escaped the economic chaos in China in the 1850s. They came to California and became the workforce that built the Transcontinental Railroad from the West Coast. After its completion, the competition for jobs with the cheap labor force led to the Chinese Massacre and the Chinese Exclusion Act. Note that the Chinese Exclusion Act wasn't repealed until 1943. As recently, just last month, on May 20th, the city of Antioch, California, apologizes for the dehumanizing atrocities committed against early Chinese immigrants. Antioch was what was known as a sundown town, banning Chinese residents from walking in the city streets after sunset.
Yep.
In 1876, white mobs participated in the driving out by forcibly removing residents. They gave residents until 3 p.m. to leave the city before burning Chinatown to the ground. I'll explain the Page Act in a later slide. And many of you are aware of the Japanese internment camps, where American citizens were stripped of all rights, their properties, and locked up in concentration camp. In 1970s, we had an energy crisis in this country. People started buying smaller and more fuel-efficient cars from Japan. Vincent Chin, a 27-year-old Chinese man, was mistaken as Japanese. He was pursued and brutally murdered by 2 auto workers in Detroit with a baseball bat. They blamed him for being out of job in the auto industry. The perpetrators got off with a $3,000 fine and probation because the judge said that those 2 men were not the kind of men you put in jail. So anti-Asian hate is cyclical. We are convenient scapegoats. I grew up in Hong Kong, where my mom visited a Chinese massage therapist for her chronic arthritis. Acupressure helped restore her health. The number of Asian spas in America has grown rapidly. I have many friends who get treatments at Asian-owned spas, myself included. I want people to think about this when they think about Asian-owned spas and Asian massage therapists. Many of these hardworking women are providers for their family. Not only do they break through the knots on our shoulders and our backs, they push through socioeconomic barriers to improve the lives of the family. These are strong women. They are grandmothers, mothers, sisters, who should have been valued for their hard work. But that's not the story that you heard from the media. The shooter in Atlanta spoke about his motivation. He described himself as having a sex addiction and pointed to those Asian spas he targeted as a source of temptation. Too many people assume that the spas he targeted were associated with prostitution. Jumping to that conclusion that Asian-owned spas provide cover for sex work not only ignores studies that suggest workers are sexually victimized by customers, but reflect the double standards immigrants face all too often. And one day I can tell you all the stories. When I first came here in the 70s, I waited tables at Chinaland, a restaurant out in Point Loma. And I can't tell you how many times I was grabbed. And I'm sorry, it's a restaurant. I mean, would they do that in a restaurant to a white waitress? I don't think so. But anyway, that's another day and another story. History will explain why these assumptions are commonplace. We cannot ignore how racism and sexism provided the context for that shooter in Atlanta. Preceding the Chinese Exclusion Act, there was a lesser known act named the Page Act of 1875. Page Act was enacted to exclude any Chinese immigrant deemed undesirable. Page targeted Chinese women, whom he thought were universally engaged in prostitution. The Page Act became the most successful of several efforts in the late 19th century to selectively target and exclude Chinese women from immigrating to the United States, on the grounds that, as possible sex workers, they were a corrupting force to the nation. With the passage of the Page Act, virtually all Chinese women were denied entry into the United States because of their race and gender. One of the earliest examples of legal exclusion of an immigrant population based on race and gender, and that predates the more well-known Chinese Exclusion Act by nearly a decade. This legislation is important in women's history in the United States because it laid the foundation for our country's hypersexualization of Chinese women, often with the help of the media. Chinese women were seen as a threat to the institution of marriage, a danger to white males, and they were stigmatized as being unclean. Most of the Chinese women had no affiliation with prostitution. They immigrated here for better lives and economic stability at the height of the gold rush in California. This is just a small sample of how Hollywood has portrayed Asian women in their movies. Asian women are geishas, prostitutes, or diabolical dragon ladies. If you have time, check out Samantha Bee's video, Hollywood's Walk of Shame, the history of Asian stereotypes in pop culture. It is very, very well done. You know, racism doesn't always come in the form of a white hood. I immigrated to the US from Hong Kong in 1974. Asians were a rarity back then. Everywhere I go, I was often stared at like I was an alien from another planet. The following year, 1975, after the fall of Saigon, things got much worse for me. Subtle racism became overt racism. Asian women were all treated like we were fair game. We were prostitutes. They could assault us verbally or physically, or to proposition. I have had my share of very ugly experiences to last a lifetime. While we have a long history of racism against Asian Americans in this country, we also have a long history of resiliency. And last month, we celebrated AAPI Heritage Month, but it shouldn't just be a month. I'm always going to want to elevate our people. Recent polling shows that 42% of Americans cannot name a single prominent Asian American. And for the ones who knew, it was either Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee. Anyway, so Patsy Mink, she began her life on a Maui sugar plantation. She was rejected from medical school because she was Japanese and a woman. So she went to law school. She was one of 2 women in her class and the only woman of color. In 1965, Patsy Mink rose to become the first Asian American woman and woman of color in the United States Congress. While in Congress, she spoke up for poor people and for women, and those were not popular topics. She was kind of a firecracker, a fighter, and she pushed the limits of what was acceptable. She spoke out against the Vietnam War. Her view was that it's a civil war. We have no business being over there. Well, that unpopular view didn't win her any friends in higher places. Her own party maneuvered against her. She entered the 1972 presidential primary, making her one of the first women to seek the nation's highest office. She co-authored Title IX with Edith Green, the landmark legislation that opened higher education and athletics to women. 98% of college sports budget went to men's sports. Coaches fought Title IX tooth and nail. Patsy Mink served in Congress for a quarter of a century. In her lifetime, the percent of women in Congress rose from 1% to 15%. Heck, let's get 51%. When she passed away in 2002, Title IX was renamed the Patsy Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act. I had the pleasure of meeting Kimberly Basford at the San Diego Asian Film Festival in 2008. She is the young woman who wrote, produced, and directed a beautiful documentary named Patsy Mink, Ahead of the Majority. This is wonderful. Daughter of Chinese immigrants, Margaret Fong Yu was born in Modesto, California, to a family who operated a laundry. Although she was a straight-A student, her counselor told her, don't bother trying to become a scientist because nobody would hire a Chinese person. In 1966, she was elected to the California State Assembly, representing Oakland and Castro Valley. She was the first Asian American woman elected to a state legislature in the entire country. She served for 4 terms. In 1974, Margaret Fong Yu was elected as Secretary of State in California, becoming the first Asian American woman ever elected to the state constitutional office in this country. She served 5 terms. In April of '69, Margaret Fong Yu smashed the porcelain toilet with a sledgehammer on the steps of our state capitol building. To her, pay toilets symbolized the second-class status of women. Urinals were free. She campaigned hard. She worked hard for 5 years. In 1974, she finally got the bill passed. California finally banned pay toilets in public buildings. Her actions opened up the dialogue in the fight for equity, whether it is razors, dry cleaning, or personal hygiene products. Women pay more for gender-specific products than men. In 2019, California Secretary of State Building in Sacramento was named the Margaret Fong Yu Secretary of State Building. This is the first state-owned building to be named after an Asian American woman. During her 2 decades as Secretary of State, she was credited for introducing California to include candidate statements in our ballot pamphlets, voter registration by mail, voter registration at DMVs, and providing absentee ballots to any voters requesting one. I'm proud to say that I voted for her numerous times on the California ballot. Tammy Duckworth was born in Thailand, a biracial daughter of a Thai Chinese mother and an American father. She spent her childhood moving between Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia, and Singapore. Tammy went to high school and college in Hawaii, and then attended graduate school in Washington, D.C. and Illinois. Her family moved to Hawaii when she was 16. They had to leave her mom behind because 1, they couldn't afford another plane ticket, and 2, mom didn't have the right immigration status. In Hawaii, her father refused to take low-level jobs, leaving the family homeless, and Tammy holding the family together, doing odd jobs on the streets of Oahu, and at the same time maintaining good grades in high school. Tammy Duckworth served as an Army Lieutenant Colonel and became one of a few handful of female helicopter pilots. She was in Iraq for 8 months before that fateful day. In 2004, she was shot down in her Black Hawk helicopter. The rocket-propelled grenade landed on her lap, severed both her legs, and pulverized her right arm. She spent 13 months at Walter Reed, recovering and learning to walk again. I had the pleasure of meeting her in 2008 at an API caucus during the Democratic National Convention when we nominated Obama. Because of her fierce advocacy for amputees while she was recovering at Walter Reed, she was asked to serve in the Department of Veterans Affairs. She ran for Congress and served in the House from 2013 to 2016. And then in 2016, she won a Senate seat, and she's the junior senator from Illinois. I highly recommend her memoir. Every day is a gift. She is funny, she is determined, and she's an all-around badass woman. What a life story she has. Read it, read it, read it, you'll love it. Thank me later. Okay, back to reality. Just last month, President Biden signed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act on May 20th. This bill was authored by Senator Masi Hirono of Hawaii and Grace Meng of Representative Grace Meng of New York. This bill is actually really good. It's not just for AAPI hate crimes, it's for all hate crimes. So it increases the accessibility by having the website in using multiple languages. They have a point person from the DOJ to help expedite and review these crimes because it has such a high threshold before it can be a crime and not a hate incident. And also to expand support for local and state law enforcement agencies. The bill passed the Senate on April 22nd, 94 to 1 vote. Do you want to guess who that one no vote was? Josh Hawley. And it passed the House on May 18, 364 to 62 vote. Guess what? All the no votes came from Republicans. This piece of legislation is a good start, but much more needs to be done to dismantle the root causes of systemic racism, oppression, and white supremacy. Day in and day out, this is what I see in the media. AAPIs are invisible. We're erased. We're always the other, the perpetual foreigner. We are not even part of the conversation on gender or racial equity. I don't want to leave you with just our fears and our frustration. I want this presentation to be about hope. After all, we are activists, and we have to have hope in our hearts as activists. We want you, our allies, to acknowledge what is happening to us. We want you to hear us and see us. We want policies that will change this culture of hatred towards AAPI, Black and Brown sisters and brothers. Most importantly, we want our seat at the table. You all are lucky. You all have Council Member Jack Hsu now. So I'm very, very proud. Even though I don't live in La Mesa, representation is so important. We need Democrats to elect more qualified AAPIs like Patsy Mink, like Margaret Fong Yu, Tammy Duckworth. Representation matters is not just a hashtag to some of us. An empowerment seat works. Look at the city of San Diego. D3 is their LGBT empowerment seat. Look at the long line of marvelous leaders who came out of that San Diego D3 seat. We now have a mayor and a Senate President pro tem from that seat. After the 2010 census, the redistricting committee in San Diego created an API empowerment seat in San Diego City Council D6. Democrats, will you help us build our bench in D6 by supporting well-qualified AAPI candidates? Because many people ask me, Judy, what can we do? What can we do? How can we help? How can we help your community? Share power with us. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Judy. And yes, having Jack Hsu join the council for us was a great day. I I'm getting a IM about a member, by the way, having difficulty joining. So if you could direct that to Evelyn or Katie, I'd be grateful. That would be better. They will be better positioned to help the member who's having difficulty logging in. Okay, so a little technical message there. Do we have any questions for Judy from the membership here? Just drop those in chat if you do. And I'm going to start by asking, same question I asked Jack Shu last time. What can we do in daily life? I work with several Asian colleagues and treat them with respect, try to at least. But is there something more we can do? Something we see on the news? If something comes up on the news?
Okay, there are different ways you can help. On the Stop AAPI Hate website, they actually have bystander training. If anything, if you don't want to help, if you see something happening, you can start recording. You know Danielle Fraser and that 9 minutes, 30 seconds video. So if you witness something and if you can't really physically help, you can start recording. And another thing that you can do is our businesses are all small businesses, like in the Convoy district in D6, they've really been hurting. They have, it's because of the pandemic. So you can always, I try to give my businesses to the AAPI community because the majority of we have no big businesses. They're mostly mom and pop businesses, right? And then support, support our activists. We are, this is the first time I see our Mayor of San Diego putting together an API policy group together to advise him. And when I served on the commission, that was our role also to advise the governor, then Governor Brown, and the state legislature on all things that impact us, So one of the things that we did was to ask for disaggregate data, because AAPI has it is this really diverse group. We're not a monolith. We have 40 some languages. We have, so disaggregating the data in education, in healthcare, it will show the disparity between some of our Southeast Asian sisters and brothers do not have equal access to all the services, education. I could go on forever, so stop me now.
Okay. We have a question from the members here. Is there a link for the local AAIP group?
AAPI.
Sorry.
AAPI Democratic Club?
Okay.
Are you talking about the club?
It just says, is there a link for the local AAPI group to join? So I don't know.
Yeah, I do, but I'm not on Zoom all the time, so I don't know how to get the link, but I can get the link for you later to the club.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, it's AAPI Democratic Club, yeah. Because let me see if I can get out of the full screen and go Google it. Somebody Google it for me, just.
I think, guys, I think if you just Google San Diego AAPI Democratic Club, it'll come right up.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, thanks.
Good. All right.
And get your AAPIs and they're liberal. Get them active, get them engaged, get them to help elect people who look and sound like us, because we want a seat at the table. Until we have a seat at the table, policy isn't going to change by itself.
Yeah, good point. All right, do we have any other questions for Judy? I guess not. I don't see anything coming up. Thank you very much, Judy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
We have one more thing here. Just a little accolade. All right, so we're gonna move on. Thank you again, Judy. Our next speaker is Matthew Brown from the ADL. Matthew. There we go. Getting started right away. Great. So start out by introducing yourself, please.
Yes, let me get my screen open here. Bear with me a minute. Okay, no problem seeing that, correct? Domestic violence, extremism,
great.
crimes, anti-Semitism. Very good. Okay. Thank you very much, Mitch, and good evening, everybody. Appreciate the invitation to participate in this forum and speak on behalf of the Anti-Defamation League. My name is Matthew Brown. I am the Associate Director here in the San Diego Regional Office. My primary responsibilities for the Anti-Defamation League are law enforcement liaison and community security. And in that role, I will walk you through a number of different things that I do. I manage our incident reporting, which is essentially people from the community and law enforcement and others reporting incidences of hate, which is not solely anti-Semitism, but all sorts of different types of hate. And then I strategize with law enforcement, state, local, and federal, about 25 different local law enforcement or local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies here in the county, throughout the county, as to how to combat that. And one of the things I'll say about the ADL real quickly is, as it relates to hate and extremism, we like to shine a light on it to expose it, because it's important to expose it to the citizens and the community. However, differing that from promoting it for certain. So we appreciate the opportunity to speak briefly on extremism and hate as we work to counter it and educate about it as it rears its ugly head. It impacts large numbers of people and it causes disruptive and dangerous activity. So just a quick overview of the ADL. We've been fighting hate for over 100 years, and we were established in 1913, initially to counter anti-Semitism in the US during World War I and World War II. However, wisely, the organization's founders determined that the best way really to fight hate targeting Jews was to counter all hate and protect the rights of all people. So we accomplish our work by working with schools and law enforcement agencies and interreligious groups and government. We assist in drafting policies and laws such as hate crime laws, and we lobby legislators for passage and adoption of these laws and resolutions on behalf of all marginalized communities. And our education programs have reached more than 65 million students and adults, and our training programs have helped thousands of law enforcement officers to combat hate, bias, and extremism, and to build communities grounded in respect. So I think it's important here, I'm going to rattle through this stuff quickly because I think it's important that we all have a similar foundation for definitions. First, definitions of violent extremism and how that differs from extremism, and then we will very quickly walk through what a hate crime is and versus a hate incident. So a few thoughts to keep in mind as we go through these definitions. Extreme ideologies often seek radical changes in government, in religion, or society as a whole. Extreme ideologies. And extremism can also be used to refer to the radical wings of broader movements, such as anti-abortion movements or environmental movements, social issues. Bear in mind that not every extremist movement is bad, right? Everybody remembers the abolitionist abolish slavery movement, which is one example, obviously, of an extreme movement, extreme certainly at the time, that hopefully everyone would say was positive for society. But most extreme movements do exist outside of the mainstream because their views and practices are objectionable. And not every extremist is or will become violent. Thankfully, most do not. But the few that do can create significant harm and ripple far beyond the individual acts. So let's define violent extremism. Everybody can read that. It's an ongoing effort, though, due to the constant changes of motives and context and targets. Defining it is complex. Remember that a person can be extremist but nonviolent, and any ideology has the potential to produce extreme members of a group who resort to violence. Violent extremism is a broad category. It's broader than terrorism in that it can include politically motivated violence and hate crimes. Traditional terrorism, as we all know it, is often politically motivated, and it generally targets a large group of people for shock value. Violent extremism isn't always targeting a large group of people with the initial attack. Its impact certainly can impact an entire community. Okay, everybody understands those definitions. So let's walk through quickly what a hate crime is. And the reason this is important is because hate crimes certainly are part of extremism. Extremists, particularly as they become violent, actually end up facilitating hate crimes. So here we go. The act must be criminal. That is, before it's even considered a hate crime, the act that the person commits must be criminal. And if it's not criminal, it's not going to be a hate crime, and is therefore might be a bias motivated incident, but it might not be prosecutable at any level, city, state, federal. Example, well, let's walk through these quickly. So there has to be a criminal act. It has to be against a person or property. It has to be intentional. That is, in order to qualify as a hate crime, the target has to have been intentionally selected. And we're going to walk through here in a minute in the state of California what those classes are that fall into hate crimes in terms of intentionally targeting them. And understand that the identity has to be based on actual or perceived identity. An individual, for example, if they're a minority group, or they might just be perceived as a minority group, or maybe they were coming from some sort of a peaceful protest or rally that was largely minority based, and because they were associated with that, they could be perceived as that, and then they're targeted because they were a part of that rally. Even if they themselves are not a racial or ethnic minority, they could still qualify as a hate crime. Example, yelling a racial slur at someone on the street is hateful, but it's not criminal. The target has to have been intentionally selected because of their identity or their perceived identity. If not, it's not a hate crime. Additionally, we have freedom of speech, and it's not illegal to yell across the street, even a racial slur. And another example, a man assaults another man at a bar following an argument about sports teams. The victim of the assault is gay, but there is no evidence that the assailant was aware of the victim's sexual orientation. So although there is an assault and that is a crime, it's not a hate crime because there's no proof definitively that the perpetrator targeted the individual because they were in a marginalized community or a minority class. Hate itself is not a crime, and hating someone is not a crime. People are free to think and believe in extreme and hateful things. Okay, so now we've defined extremism, violent extremism, and the elements of a hate crime. Let's move on here and take a look at the identity groups that state of California law protects under hate crime. Race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, and disability. There are now 49 states that have hate crime laws. However,
I'm still on the meeting.
However, not all of the hate crime
Okay.
laws.
Hang on.
Somebody's not muted, I believe.
Got it. Go on.
Are we
Thank you.
good?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So what's unique about California, and there are a few other states that have it, is that in addition to gender, we have gender identity. The FBI's annual Hate Crime Statistics Act revealed that in 2019 was the deadliest year on record with 51 hate crime murders, which was a 113% increase over the previous record of 24 set in 2018. Total hate crime incidences, and these are the latest stats from the FBI, are for 2019, reflect hate crimes rose in 2019 to 7,314. These are not just incidences, these are hate crimes after a decline in 2018. Okay. Do these quickly and let's move on. So we talked about violent extremists, and I know it's foremost on your minds. Many of you are East County individuals, and you experienced a wide array of activity over the course of the last 18 months. So let's take a look at common messages for violent extremists. And remember, one can hold an extremist view and choose not to act, violent or otherwise. The messaging across many extremist groups has similarities and can be attractive to those who feel isolated, marginalized, or forgotten. So what we're talking about is individuals that are susceptible or vulnerable to radicalization by extremist groups. Here's some common messaging from various different extremist groups. Our group is under attack. The enemy is responsible for this injustice. We must defend our traditions. And the use of violence is the only way to defend our beliefs. The use of violence garners attention, and that will get others to pay attention to us. Our violent actions will result in a better future. These are factual beliefs of extremist groups. It's not uncommon for those who perpetrate violent extremist acts, particularly hate crimes, to victim blame. For example, they might say, I did this because they provoked me. Okay, intentionality. The reason I'm briefing you on this is because it's important to assess an individual's intentions. And assessing an extremist's intention is critical. With intentionality, we're going to see phases someone considering taking extremist action might use, which reflect their state of mind and their intentions. So first of all, they ponder certainty. Should we or shouldn't we? Something must happen. And when we at the ADL in our Center on Extremism, through our investigative researchers, are looking at social media posts by extremists, we look for language like we need to, or we have to, or we have no choice but to act, as we look for information that's actionable and that we can pass on to law enforcement to get in front of this activity. So they ponder certainty. And then extremists, as they're considering violence, they are concerned with urgency. When should action be taken? It must happen soon. And then lastly, they consider enormity. And you may see grandiose extreme verbiage as they rationalize what are the consequences of us not taking action. If it does not happen, the world as we know it ends. They actually believe that. You see the grandiose statements there of genocide and government infiltration and hostile invaders. This is stuff that
I want to interrupt you for a second.
Okay.
I look at these three slides here. I've been kind of immersed in news about the January 6th insurrection.
Yes.
And the Republicans voting down the commission.
Yes.
I was going to ask you this question at the end, but I'll save it now because it slides into this slide. I mean, I myself am very, very nervous about a second civil war coming. Nervous is an understatement. And I look at the Republican Party possibly enabling it. And I'm wondering if this is unreasonable of me. And the reason I bring it up now is like, well, yeah, we need to act to stop the insurrectionists. The timeline is now. I really wish that the National Democratic Party would be moving faster on this. And yeah, kind of the fate of democracy may be at stake here. There are times there are times in history when these things seem realistic. If I can go on a little bit more, 1930s, I remember reading about in the 1930s, Americans looked around the world and thought the light of civilization was going out everywhere. I don't think that was unreasonable of them at that time. So is it unreasonable to be so afraid of extremists that you start looking like that slide? So that's my question. Or
no.
Yeah.
And Mitch, I'm not looking at who's speaking, but I recognize your voice, right? That's you, Mitch?
Yeah.
So no, it's not unreasonable to be concerned about these extremists. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security have recently stated that domestic violent extremism is the most significant threat on US soil. And when I say threat, I'm not obviously talking about climate change and other matters of that nature, but I'm talking about violence and insurgency and insurrection and things of that nature. So no, it's not a concern. I mean, it should be a concern. And, militias and some of these other people actually believe that the federal government is collaborating with a shadow conspiracy to strip Americans of their rights, starting with their right to keep and bear arms. So I'll just jump to a couple of matters that I have in here. Our Center on Extremism, which is a group of investigative researchers headquartered out of our national office in New York City, and also embedded in our 25 regional offices across the nation, are responsible for monitoring social media and the open net and the dark net, looking for extremist activity, patterns, trends, plans, motivation, intentions, and things of that nature. And what they've found is, particularly, you mentioned the January 6th insurrection, and there was a lot of attention paid to certain groups. I have a slide that shows the different groups that were present. And what we found is, because there was a lot of attention drawn to the activity that they were conducting through social media, and you all, by the way, have experienced it in East County through a group, which I don't have them in a slide in this presentation. I created a separate slide because I know, Mitch, that you asked me the question about Defend East County, which obviously was a group that was present in East County and actually formed when there was attacks on businesses and arson and looting and so on and so forth of the businesses in La Mesa. And then they formed, and then before you knew it, they had 22,000 followers on Facebook. Their founder, Justin Hawkins, spoke and basically said, "We are a group of pissed off patriots, and we are going to defend, and we're going to defend." But what ended up happening, and they were doing this on Facebook, but they ended up attracting a lot of individuals that wanted to be violent. And before you knew it, they were having text exchange and other types of exchanges on Facebook, talking about the violence that they themselves were going to conduct in order to prevent protesters and individuals that used the peaceful protest to commit violence. And before you knew it, in October of 2020, Facebook removed their account. So what happens, towards your question, Mitch, is that these individuals, they don't just dissipate. These extremists don't just dissipate. As a matter of fact, Defend East County has some individuals that have started another group, another couple groups. One of them is called Exiled Patriots. And what they also start doing is they leave mainstream media and they start using encrypted channels where they can communicate anonymously and use code and things of that nature, making it more difficult for investigative researchers and intelligence groups to detect them. But we still have that effort 24/7 and continue to do that. Should you be concerned about it? Well, the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security say you should be concerned about it. So that's not unreasonable. Let me move on, though, and I think I'll address that in another couple of ways. Here's just a couple of facts and figures regarding domestic violent extremism in 2020. I'll just read out loud for you in case you can't see it. Lethal extremist violence in 20 was dominated by right-wing extremism. 94% of extremist-related murders were tied to forms of right-wing extremism, including anti-government extremism and extreme misogynists. Firearms. This doesn't surprise any of us, were the weapon of choice for 88% of the extremist murders that occurred in 2020. Guns have been the murder weapon for the majority of extremist-related killings in every year in the last 7 years. Right-wing extremists are responsible for 323 of the 429 people killed in extremist-related murders over the last decade. And almost every year, police officers are killed by extremists, and in some cases are targeted by extremist movements. In 2020, 3 police officers were killed by extremists, all of them associated with far-right causes. We've had some deaths related to extremists in 2021. I will tell you that when we present on violent extremism and we go through this and we're focusing on right-wing extremists, and our law enforcement partners and others raise their hand and say, what about the left? I'll bring in a slide about the left because we don't want to ignore the left. But the reason that we focus on the right-wing extremists is because of these facts and figures right there. They speak for themselves. So let's talk about what has happened over the past several years. Experts, including the ADL, consider that extremist hate has been simmering for several years. The analogy, and I actually heard this analogy today and I thought it was appropriate, and I knew after hearing it today that I would share it with this group, is that extremism, violent extremism, and hate misogynist, racist, anti-religion, anti-ethnic, et cetera, et cetera. It sort of boiled in the sewer, if you will, for a period of time. And then what ended up happening during the Trump administration, it provided an acceptable path out, if you will, of that simmering extremism, a path out. I thought that that was a reasonable analogy. And this picture here, this is the Unite the Right rally, which was a white supremacist rally in 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia, during which there was a lot of violence, and there was an individual that was purposely run over, a counter-protester, countering to the white supremacist, counter-protester, a 22-year-old woman that was run over, rammed, and killed by a vehicle by one of the marchers. So adherents of extremist ideologies with acknowledged membership to extremist groups have exhibited overt acts of defiance and violence for a number of years. In recent history, leading up to, you made reference to the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Buildings that has included we look at these at the bookends, the Unite the Right rally in Virginia, leading up to the January 6th insurrection. We in the ADL and our Center on Extremism say that what happened on January 6th was perhaps one of the most predictable, not surprising, predictable acts of extremist insurrection in modern history. So as it relates to the attack on the Capitol, extreme right-wing identifiers were on full display. These are some examples on January 5th and January 6th in Washington, D.C. These images are exactly as they appeared in D.C. footage and photos. Some of these symbols were on shirts, some were on hats, stickers, banners, flyers, linking right-wing extremists across the spectrum. You see one of these is NSC right in the middle there, stands for National Social Council. It's a neo-Nazi group with small autonomous regional chapters in the United States and abroad. You see another one, KEK, K-E-K, which is actually, it's a fabricated deity linked to semi-ironic religion embraced by the alt-right white supremacists. And you see a number of others that were present during the insurrection. So let's move to extremist presence in San Diego County. Pictured here is Michael Sobczak. Some of you might be familiar with that name. He was in the news here in San Diego. He is now, he wasn't then, that's a picture of him in the march towards the Capitol. He was, at this time, he was current, a national level and a city of Escondido local American Legion commander. He was an active participant in the January 6th March on the Capitol, and he is an active member of the Proud Boys extremist group. Since this time and since some of his violent language on social media, he was removed by the American Legion as a national level commander, and just within the last 60 days was removed by the city of Escondido as a local commander by the American Legion. So I mentioned to you that he's a Proud Boy. So who are the Proud Boys? This is who the Proud Boys are: a misogynistic, transphobic, Islamophobic, anti-immigration group, extremist group who espouse white supremacy and anti-Semitic ideologies. They incite violence, they participate in acts of violence, and they seek to intimidate. Everybody's heard of the Proud Boys. That's a summary of what they are. This drives it home that we had this individual in a leadership position for the American Legion here in the city of Escondido. Moving on. People recognize that, and I'll bet there's some people on the line here of the 65 or so people that are on the line. This vehicle has driven around East County for the last year plus with this Nazi flag on its back window. I won't go into detail, but the individual resides in East County. We've had this incident of this vehicle reported to us on probably a dozen plus occasions. Of course, I reached out to the Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department is very familiar with the individual. They've actually spoken to the individual, and the individual, when they speak with him, advocates his First Amendment rights, freedom of speech, freedom of display, and talks about the fact that he's been confronted about it. Obviously, it's very offensive. It's intended to be offensive. Unfortunately, it falls under First Amendment protections. You may have seen him on the 8 freeway. Again, he resides in East County. I won't go into detail, but the Sheriff's Department is aware of who the individual is. This is the 3%er flag, which was flying on a house in the city of San Diego, not in Sheriff's territory, but in the city of San Diego. And what we have to caution is the 3%ers are a very big Second Amendment backers. We spoke to the city of San Diego Police Department about this particular flag since it was flying in their jurisdiction. They did some research and they made a determination that the individual did not pose a threat. It is offensive because the 3%ers are an extremist group. But like I said earlier, once again, this is a First Amendment protected right. And this does not necessarily mean that although they have extremist ideologies, some of whom espouse violence and have committed violence, it doesn't necessarily mean that this particular individual was. Hammerskins. They are one of the oldest hardcore racist skinhead groups in the United States and have a history of violence. Their logo and primary symbol consists of 2 crossed hammers, as you see it there, usually superimposed over a cogwheel, and you can see the cogwheel there. And this symbol typically appears in red, white, and black, the colors of the Nazi flag. Again, these are present in San Diego. The San Diego County Sheriff's Department monitors some types of activity of this particular group, as they do this group. This is the Aryan Brotherhood, which is the oldest and most notorious racist prison gang in the United States. Started in California in the 1960s. It's present primarily in California and in other federal prison systems. And because of its longevity, their members have come to use a variety of symbols and codes, but the most common symbol of the Aryan Brotherhood remains a shamrock, as you can see in the background, often in combination with a swastika. So I mentioned the left. What about the left? You may remember in 2003, there was what is now regarded as the most economically detrimental arson in United States history, which that is the University Town Center massive complex that you see off of La Jolla Village Drive and 805. And in 2003, when it was in its framing stage, that massive complex, it was burned down. And it was burned down by ELF, Earth Liberation Front, which are a group of eco-terrorists. And their motto is, if you build it, we will burn it. And they actually, to this day, it's an unsolved arson. The FBI actually recently offered a $25,000 reward this many years later to see if anybody will come up with any new information. But these eco-terrorists left signs behind laying claim to it, but still an unsolved case. And then the white elephant in the room on the bottom represents Antifa. And we would be remiss if we don't mention Antifa. Antifa is the anti-fascist protest movement known as Antifa, and it gained sort of prominence in the United States after that Charlottesville white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017. And in Charlottesville and in many subsequent events held by white supremacists or right-wing extremists, Antifa activists have aggressively confronted what they believe to be an authoritarian movement and groups. And while most counter-protesters, including Antifa, tend to be peaceful, there have unfortunately been several instances between Antifa and the far right that have turned violent. And this actually happened several months ago in Pacific Beach. It was all over the news. And there were some Trump protesters and Trump ralliers that were out, and they advertised that they were going to be out in Pacific Beach on social media. So Antifa and other individuals came out, and there were some individuals that were marching with Antifa that broke the ranks and started committing violent acts. Unfortunately, the San Diego Police Department didn't anticipate that. They were outnumbered. However, a couple of months later, actually we're in May, June. So in March, there was another pro-Trump rally in Pacific Beach. This time law enforcement was ahead of it, and they actually outnumbered the protesters and the counter-protesters. So these are entities from the left. There are some others, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the violence that has been associated with groups on the left.
And also here in La Mesa.
Also there in La Mesa. So, again, I already went through what I was mentioning about Defend East County. We don't regard Black Lives Movement or Black Lives Matter movement and an organization as an extremist group on the left. Unfortunately, what has happened, and it happened in La Mesa, that there were individuals that hijacked the peaceful protests, and I can't see you all, but hopefully you're nodding your head like I am, in affirmation. There were individuals that hijacked peaceful protests and looked for opportunities to loot, to arson, to commit all sorts of vandalism and so on and so forth. But we don't necessarily consider that an extremist group. So
how do we know that they were individuals who hijacked the demonstration?
How do we know that, as opposed to the entire
Just part of the
movement
demonstration? I mean, I'm not.
You mean, Mitch, as opposed to those people going in with that intent? Yeah.
I mean,
there's no evidence that the individuals went in. There were some individuals that maybe they could have been African American, they could have been any individuals that went in with Black Lives Matter signs and so on and so forth. But the number of individuals that went in with the intent of peaceful protests, with megaphones and making strong statements, the research has shown that the majority of the individuals did not have that intent. And that is not the ideology behind Black Lives Matter. Their ideology does not state, we will do anything to include violence to make a point, versus some of these other extremist groups that advocate violence. Significant difference. So I want to go over some. Yes, and I want to go over.
And we are running a little short of time. So,
okay. Let's just cut to this real quickly. White supremacist propaganda, it's on the rise in 2020 and into 2021. Here are some numbers. This is concerning. Is it violence? No, it's not violence, but what it is it's radicalization and recruitment. And it's all over the internet, and we monitor it. Patriot Front, one of the most prolific groups, has committed or has distributed propaganda in almost every state in the nation, and they continue to. We created some courses about online radicalization, which we instruct high school faculty and high school administrators on, so that they can be on the lookout for what kids might be seeing, and we develop tools for them to intervene. So the future outlook, anger and vitriol we saw on January 6th is not going to dissipate anytime soon. That anger still exists. A new breed of extremists have emerged, and they're living in an entire ecosphere of disinformation and lies and conspiracy theories. Over the coming months and years, as this new breed of extremists mingle with established extremists, including white supremacists and anti-government extremists and anti-Semites and hardcore conspiracy theorists, these individuals could, this goes towards your initial question, Mitch, they could coalesce into a distinct and potent extremist movement in their own right. Alternatively, they could eventually add to the ranks of the other hateful causes. So we must keep in mind the current landscape, and we must keep in front of it. We won't have time to go through this. It's an interesting discussion about anti-Semitism, but because we're short on time and I want to leave any time for questions, we are going to skip through that. I will just say, since anti-Semitism is on the rise, these last bullets that I have are sort of key. Take a look at the facts and figures. Between April 26th and May 23rd, nationwide anti-Semitic incidences reported the ADL increased 75%. That's this year. In San Diego, during the same period of time, we experienced a 111% increase in anti-Semitic incidences reported to us. And this followed the conflict in Israel and Gaza. So this
Actually,
is my
let's go
contact
back. Let's go.
information.
You've tempted me too much, so let's go back a little bit here.
Okay.
All right, Jews are scapegoats because they are perceived as white, powerful, rich, corporate. All right, that's self-explanatory. The next slide, though. The next paragraph.
The next bullet's
Yeah.
also in quote. Notice that it's also in quotes. All that said, however, the perception is that Jews as a community, this is a generalization. The Jews as a community are not impacted by anti-Semitic acts, as evidenced by the fact that they still have jobs, they still have homes, they're still economically stable. So really, what is the impact? And you could juxtapose that with, you can see that there's some consideration for reparations for the African American community, and Judy spoke of discrimination against the AAPI and the impact that has had on some individuals' abilities to maintain jobs, to maintain homes, and stay economically stable. And all I'm saying here is that this is a perception, but what we do state is that although Jews make up a small minority of the populace in our town and in the nation, like is the case with other marginalized communities that are victims of hate and bigotry and discrimination, it's not so necessarily so much what happens to the individual, it's what happens as it impacts the community.
Okay.
So, and the only reason that I stated those last few bullets there, Mitch, was regardless of anybody's place in society, their status in society, their socioeconomic status, their success, you can still be targeted and definitively impacted as individuals and as a community, as was exemplified in Nazi Germany, regardless of anybody's status at the time. So,
and also in Tulsa 100 years ago this week.
Absolutely.
This was a high status business community in that place and time.
So I apologize that I had to rush through this, folks. There's a lot of information to cover. I very much appreciated Judy's presentation of the AAPI. We have some discussions in the ADL about the AAPI and what we can do to partner with these types of groups to together pass legislation and new hate crime laws for the benefit of the marginalized communities. One of the questions that somebody asked Judy was, what can you do? And one of the things that I would encourage people to do is to monitor, I've got a note here of it, is to monitor the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act, which is House of Representatives Bill 350 of the 117th Congress. And that Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act, which is sitting in subcommittees right now. It hasn't gone to a vote yet in the House, and then of course not in the Senate. It is anticipated to pass in 21. It gives government additional tools to identify, monitor, and thwart illegal activities by these types of extremists. It's going to equip law enforcement with tools needed to help keep our homes, our families, and our communities across the country safe. That's just one of the things that I think would be helpful to monitor and make sure that your representative is voting in the right way for that bill.
Okay. We have a question. What is the ADL position on BLM? Are there alliances?
Yes, there are alliances. And I will tell you that we do agree in theory of the Black Lives Matter movement, which is different than a group called Movement for Black Lives, because Movement for Black Lives is more discriminatory, if you will. When I mean discriminatory, I mean discriminating and singles out particular groups. The Black Lives Matter movement, we agree with in theory, and we are always keeping a watchful eye to ensure that they never advocate any and everything to get their point across. So the ADL supports the Black Lives Matter movement.
Thank you. We have a question from Rob Howard. What are the chances of the legislation that you discussed a couple of minutes ago being used to harass or monitor diverse civil rights groups?
Very slim. You know, diverse civil rights group. The ADL is a civil rights organization, and we have a whole unit to include civil rights attorneys and others that work with a number of civil rights organizations. That will be closely monitored. You should see all the fine print on this act to ensure that it stays in line with its intentions and that it's enforced properly. So I guess the answer to that question is highly unlikely.
Okay, we have a question from our board member, Chris Pearson, who always asks great questions. Of the white supremacist groups currently active in San Diego, what's the threat level and to whom?
Threat level is, I mentioned the Hammerskins, I mentioned the Aryan Brotherhood. There are some groups that have, they're up in San Marcos in the San Elio community a few months ago. A number of flyers started showing up from the National Socialist Movement, or National Alliance, excuse me, which had been a pretty quiet group, and all of a sudden the stickers started showing up in that nice community and utility boxes and at intersection. And it was very concerning. And basically what happens when a group like that puts out propaganda, they are there to intimidate, and they are there to say, we are present. I mentioned the Patriot Front and a number of others, Folks Front and a number of other groups, particularly on college campuses, that are looking at recruiting youth, influencing youth, looking for vulnerable individuals to expose an ideology to, motivate them to act, and then motivate them to plan and motivate them to participate oftentimes, or sometimes, I don't want to say oftentimes, in violence. Those are several of the groups that are prolific, and there's not currently a threat per se, but there is high concern and potential. So one thing I'll say about that is, and we did this up in San Elio in San Marcos, when those stickers started showing up, the initial response by the sheriff's department was to remove the stickers, work with the city's public works people to remove the stickers. What we state instead, and the sheriff's department changed their approach, is don't remove them right away. Allow law enforcement to respond. It's not a crime, it's a hate incident. Allow law enforcement to respond, collect any evidence that there might be, look at any surrounding external facing cameras to see whether or not anybody was captured. We have to nip these hate incidences in the bud before they escalate into hate crimes.
Okay, we have a question about what your relationship is with the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. We have a good working relationship with SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center. We differ from them a little bit. They do a lot of publications. As you know, there's a regular publication, a magazine that they put out. They don't have the close working relationship with law enforcement that we have. We look at one of our, we advocate, we investigate, we educate, and we provide actionable information. They are a phenomenal group of subject matter experts, and we do give and take. We exchange information with SPLC. We respect SPLC. Just a little bit of a different wheelhouse as it relates to actionable information versus research.
Okay. I'll save the final question for myself because I'm bossy. If one of us here on this call has suspects in a neighbor, maybe sees a flag or hears somebody say something at a picnic, maybe it's just some extremist view, maybe they might even be a member of one of these groups. What should they do?
I tell you what I would appreciate you doing is, actually, I don't have it up, but you can write down www.adl, excuse me, www.adl.org/report incident. Or to make it easier for yourself, just go onto our website, adl.org, and look for the ability to report an incident. And then there's a form that you fill out, and you can put all the information. You can capture a picture. if there's some vandalism or graffiti or flag flying, it's an incident. We don't want the citizen to err on the side of not reporting. And law enforcement says the same thing. Let us and law enforcement be the decider about whether or not it's credible or not credible. Report it.
Okay, all right. We do have a couple more good questions in the chat, but I think we've taken up way more of your time than we asked for, and we appreciate your generosity with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you have anything final you want to say here?
Just appreciate the work everybody's doing. Tremendous for us to be able to participate in this particular group, and I hope to have some communication with you all going forward. Thank you for the work you do.
Thank you. All right, we've got a couple of great speakers so far, and there's more great speakers to come. Our next speaker is Peter Anderson from the Sierra Club. And I'm gonna ask you to unmute and just take it away.
All right. I'm Dr. Peter Anderson, a former SDSU professor, and now I'm retired, so I have a lot of time to devote toward activism. I'm the immediate past chair of Sierra Club San Diego, and currently serve on several volunteer committees at both the chapter level here in San Diego County and on the state county. Been asked to talk about climate change today, and I don't want to insult your intelligence by explaining to you what that is, because you all know what it is. It's an existential threat to our survival as a species and to other species as well. And the Department of Defense in 2016 published a report which said the greatest threat to America, and it wasn't from Islamic terrorism, it wasn't from China, it wasn't from Russia, it was from climate change. The greatest threat to the United States and to the American military is from climate change. And I'll document some of the reasons why. Gradually, the climate is changing, largely because of greenhouse gases, mostly carbon dioxide, but other gases like methane and chlorofluorocarbons. At any rate, the climate is slowly warming. I live in East County. The change is palpable. When I moved to Hamul in 1991, we had our air conditioner on maybe 2-3 days a year. Now it's escalated to over 2 weeks a year. And the number of days where it hits 100 has increased. So you can tell subjectively, as well as look at the data on this, climate is slowly rising. And we have to have a response to this. We have to have a national response, and we have to have a local response. And nationally, what we need to do is have a climate policy at the state and at the federal level, which dramatically reduces greenhouse gas. This means getting off of oil completely in the next 20 years. No more oil. And therefore, we believe in no more pipelines. We believe in no more propane. We believe in no more gas outlets in houses. And the necessity of doing that is a tremendous imperative because the amount of greenhouse gas produced by the United States is huge. Over a quarter of the world's total greenhouse gas comes out of our country. And 15% of the greenhouse gas in the United States comes out of the state of California. So why act locally if this is a national problem? Well, for two reasons. First of all, as I just expressed, California produces a very large amount, 15% of our national greenhouse gas, even though we're just about 12% of the population. So it's a big chunk. And the big cities, Sacramento, San Francisco, Fresno, Los Angeles, San Diego, produce most of that. And about 45% of it comes from automobiles. So I urge you, if you have a hybrid now, good job, get an electric next time, because we have to move off of the internal combustion engine, which will kill the planet if we allow it to persist. So what's going on the local level? And why do we care about the local level? Well, we care because we're a big city and we produce a lot of greenhouse gas. But also, if California doesn't enact climate controls and strong climate legislation to lead the nation, then who will? California has typically been a leader on a host of issues, particularly environmental issues. And therefore, we have to set the precedent. So other municipalities and other states can emulate us in terms of establishing their climate action plan. I've recently had conversations with colleagues in both Maryland and Ohio that want to know, gosh, California's way ahead of us. What are you doing to prevent greenhouse gas? And I was able to tell them that. So a couple of stories about Sierra Club's local efforts. The first is that the county, which is all the all the outlying areas of the county, everything that is not a municipality is in the county of San Diego. About 600,000 people live, like I do, in Hamul, out in the county. La Mesa's different, it's an incorporated city. But many of you may live in the unincorporated county. Well, it turns out the unincorporated county produces a lot of the greenhouse gas, largely because of long commutes in automobiles and trucks from East County. So what we're trying to do is do something about that. So in 2011, the County of San Diego produced a climate action plan. And when Sierra Club looked at that and had our lawyers looked at it and other activists and experts, we decided this was a terrible plan. It barely made a dent on the greenhouse gas in the county. We took them to Superior Court. We defeated them in Superior Court. The judge says, got to come up with a new climate action plan. They did not do that. That developer oriented board of supervisors that did whatever the developers wanted here in the county appealed it to the appellate court. And it went to the appellate court of the state of California. Our lawyers once again took that case, and once again we prevailed. So now the county was under judge's orders from the district court and the appellate court to go back and redraw a climate action plan, which they did in 2018. We looked at that climate action plan. I was one of the people that perused it carefully. We said, not much better. It's really a license to pollute. And we took it back to court. Once again, in late 2019, we prevailed in Superior Court. Judge Taylor rendered a decision which said that climate action plan is null and void because it just doesn't do the trick. Once again, the county decided not to take our advice, but instead to appeal it to the California Court of Appeals. And the California Court of Appeals upheld the Sierra Club in our co-sponsoring organization's lawsuit. And once again, the climate action plan was defeated. Now, Judge Taylor told the county, you've got to put Sierra Club on your group, on your staff, collaborating on a weekly basis to create a new climate action plan, which we have done. I've personally been involved in dozens of very amicable collaborations because, quite frankly, some of the staff are as concerned about climate change as Sierrans are, or other progressives and environmentalists. So this next year, we're gonna see a new and improved climate action plan. There were many things wrong with the old climate action plan, not the least of which is that they had what are called out-of-county offsets. In fact, they were out-of-the-country offsets. Here's what that means. If a project, for example, builds 1,000 homes out in Belzura, just say hypothetically, they're supposed to reduce greenhouse gas commensurate and then some with how much they produce. Now, their theory was, well, it's a global problem. Why don't we offset it in Canada or in Peru? So they buy offsets in those countries. Now, when you hear about offsets and you hear about these climate swaps and these carbon deals, they're mostly bogus. Here's why. Many times the offsets aren't real. There's no such thing. And other times they're not additional. That is, there's a preserve that was already preserved, and now they sell that to a polluting company or a polluting municipality or a county as the offset, but it was already preserved. So we're producing a lot more greenhouse gas. There's no net benefit. It's not observable. We can't go to Peru and find out if this is a real project or not. We kind of have to take their word for it. And finally, it's unenforceable. We have no access to the Peru courts. So Judge Taylor has held that every offset on climate action has to be done here in San Diego County. Now, one of the offshoots of this is we've stopped 11 sprawl projects throughout the county, and I'm in negotiations weekly with many of these developers that want Sierra Club to cut a deal with them. We did cut a deal with one of them because they agreed to do most of the things that we wanted. But the other projects are held up. And why are we so happy that these are held up? Because sprawl projects are a terrible thing for San Diego County. First of all, they produce a plethora of greenhouse gas as people commute from those rural areas into jobs in Sorrento Valley or downtown or Mission Valley. Those produce the lion's share of greenhouse gas here in San Diego County. And ameliorating this in some far off place doesn't help us very much. We're the fourth highest ozone polluted county in America. So what we want is this air pollution to stop, both for the health of San Diego residents and for the global ecosystem. Second problem with sprawl developments is they're built in fire-prone areas. About 80% of fires start from people in rural areas in the suburban wildfire wildlands interface, it's called. And we've seen a number of these in East County and North County throughout the state of California, where thousands of homes go up in flames, people die. And so we don't want more sprawl development that would exist in areas where there's high wildfire danger. The third reason is traffic. The more you develop in the backcountry, the more traffic you have coming through the backcountry into the city and creating massive amounts of traffic congestion. Now, Sierra Club is in favor of development in the right place. We supported the Otay 250 project down on the Mexican border. Moderate income housing, near public transportation, good project. We support some of the development along Moreno Boulevard. We were a big leading exponent for the SDSU West project, which is now building an entire new campus in what used to be the Qualcomm Stadium site with 5,000 units of housing for students, for faculty, and for the general public, by the way. So Sierra Club is not anti-development. We're anti-sprawl. You have to build near jobs, near public transportation, with infill in areas that are already targeted for development, not things that are take amendments to the general plan. So Sierra Club does that, but we also get very involved in elections. We were a spearhead in electing Nathan Fletcher, who is the, aside from Diane Jacobs, who was frequently but not always on our side, was the first real voice of an environmentalist in my lifetime on the San Diego Board of Supervisors. So Nathan got elected, and now we've got Tara Lawson-Reamer, who we work very hard for. I myself made Zoom call or phone calls for her every day of the week, 7 days a week, in order to try to get Tara elected. She's a visionary environmentalist collaborating with Nathan. And we also got another good representative, Nora Vargas, who's a Democrat. First one we've had out of the South Bay, person of color that represents a community which is largely Hispanic and some Asian and African American. So Sierra Club is an organization that has a 501c3 for politics and for environmentalism, and a 501c4 for politics. So we're on the forefront of the climate battle. We want the strongest climate action plan. And I'll just say finally that the city adopted an okay climate action plan in 2015, but it's full of holes like Swiss cheese. And now we're putting forward a new climate action plan for the city. And just in the last couple of days, David Hogan, the chair of Sierra Club, and I have authored a plan for which has over 100 different asks in what the city can do to have an even stronger climate action plan so that San Diego City and San Diego County can be a leader. And finally, I'll just say, many of the other municipalities are doing good things, adopting community choice energy, which will allow us to have cheaper and more environmentally generated electricity for our house. We're advocating against leaf blowers and lawn equipment that uses these 2-cycle engines. One leaf blower run for 1 hour on a gasoline engine produces the same amount of greenhouse gas as a pickup truck going from San Diego to Fort Worth, Texas. So those things are really nasty. Got to get them off the streets. As individuals, I would urge you to move toward hybrid and then electric vehicles. Take out your old hot water heater, put in an electric one. Convert from gas. We're hoping that the county and the city provide subsidies for homeowners that want to convert from their gas-powered leaf blower or their hot water heater or their currently gas-powered furnace, because all of those produce greenhouse gas. When you hear people say, "Oh, it's fabulous, we're just going to burn natural gas, so much cleaner," yeah, cleaner than coal, but a terrible source of greenhouse gas. So this is about the future of the world. We're San Diego. I'll just bring it locally. We're San Diego to experience the worst effects of climate. We would have millions of refugees, not a few hundred at the border, but millions of climate refugees from Central and South America. We would have inundation of many of our cities. Imperial Beach is already planned for what's called managed retreat, basically abandoning the shoreline. And Del Mar has been encouraged to do the same. Much of the San Diego coastline will be inundated by the turn of the century. We can expect more floods in many parts of the country, possibly in California, as these atmospheric rivers come through, fueled by climate change. And then finally, we've already experienced a huge number of wildfires, and we've just seen the beginning of this. When you have prolonged droughts due to climate change, like we're in the middle of, the result is going to be forest fires and brush fires that will destroy lives, it'll destroy property. So I ask you to join with Sierra Club. I know many of you have a friendly ear and you belong to sister environmental organizations. I urge you to join Sierra Club. It's only $15 to become a member. We have 17,000 members and 35,000 supporters here in the county. And our membership is what gives us power. It gives us the funds for lawsuits. It gives us power in elections. And when Sierra Club talks, people listen. Nobody would listen to Peter Anderson very much as an individual. But when I walk in a room and I say, I'm representing Sierra Club, everybody listens because they understand power. And Sierra Club is the largest environmental organization in the county and in the country. Thanks for your time. Happy to take questions.
Do we have questions? Put them in the chat, please. Do not raise your hand on the thing because I won't see it. I'm going to start by asking you to talk a little bit more about something you brought up here. What do you see as kind of the 10, 25, 50-year outlook for San Diego, particularly East County, where you and I live?
Well, certainly stopping these sprawl developments. We have lawsuits going and we're in negotiations against Otay Village 13 and Otay Village 14. Things that would be built in areas with sensitive species, eagles and Kino butterflies, and would create greater fire risk. Proctor Valley, where these two are going to be built, has already burnt down twice in the last 20 years. And we're determined to stop those projects, or at least dramatically reduce their size and scope. So we're involved in negotiations with the county, with negotiations with the developer, and with potential lawsuits. In East County, we're hoping that we can do a small amount of infill in the closer in communities. There's room in some of the areas of cities like Lemon Grove and Spring Valley for some development that is genuine infill. It's near transit, near the trolley, near bus lines, and does not require long commutes for people to get to work or to shopping. We're very optimistic with the change in the Board of Supervisors because they control the unincorporated areas of the county. For the first time in memory, we think we have kindred spirits, at least for the most part, on the Board of Supervisors. We have a 3-2 Democratic majority. And on a couple of recent votes, even the two Republicans surprisingly have voted for things like a climate action plan or community choice energy. So we're pretty optimistic.
Thank you. We've got some good comments here in chat, but I'm actually not Not seeing questions here. Any more questions than we've already had? So I think I will let you go. Thank you very much, Peter.
Well, the hour is late and I appreciate your time. Very important part of the Democratic Party and particularly the Foothill Democrats who I've had the pleasure of talking to before. And so join us, whether you're in another environmental organization or you want to join Sierra Club. If you're not a Sierra Club member, $15, you ought to just do it.
Okay, thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
All right, so our next speaker is Andrea Beth Damsky. She's actually on the calendar for about 5 to 10 minutes, but yeah, we've been doing such a great job keeping on the time. So yeah, right. All right, go ahead, Andrea. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Mitch. This has been a wonderful evening. And Peter Anderson, you're a tough act to follow. I'm here tonight as chair of La Mesa's Environmental Sustainability Commission. And I had not spoken at one of our Democratic clubs before. So I want to let you know a little bit about what we're doing, what we're up to. Our commission is working on implementing our climate action plan and getting ready to update our climate action plan in the fall. So we'll just be setting the groundwork to get ready to do that very shortly. We are, as you know, a group of volunteers on our commission. We're all appointed members by the mayor. And every July is when commissions in our city have new appointees made. So you should, if you're interested in joining our commission or any other one, I know that we will have an open seat this summer. Keep checking the La Mesa website for commissions if you're interested in joining our commission. Right now, we are doing a lot of work with creating an urban forestry management program, which will be part of our climate action plan. This is to help to meet our climate action plan goals of having 10,000 new trees planted in La Mesa. Our main struggle is finding the space for them because they have to be on city-owned land. So right now they're going in parks, and we're looking at other creative opportunities for planting some of these trees. I have been on this commission since 2017. So this is just starting my 4th year. And I'm here mainly to say, hey, you know, this is our commission. We serve you, residents of La Mesa. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Our meetings are open to the public. We still are meeting on Zoom. We have been doing this since June of last year. And we are hearing that the city is looking at changing to in-person meetings again. But first we need to make sure we are OSHA compliant for the city's employees to make sure that they're safe in the ways our meeting would be conducted publicly. So we're not sure exactly when this will happen, but we're thinking sometime in the next few months. And that's my mini update and introduction. Do we have any questions, Mitch? I want to keep it brief because this has been a long meeting.
We'll take questions from the usual chat. Please type them into chat if you've got them. I did want to ask you about something that's been in the news lately, and it seems huge, and I haven't seen it much reported, which is that La Mesa is getting involved in a sort of electrical cooperative with other communities. Do you know anything about that?
Actually, yes, Peter alluded to this. We have joined with 5 other cities to join San Diego Community Power, which is a community choice energy program. Currently, the program is open to businesses. We will be opening to residents soon to provide electrical service to residents. We're the only city in East County that's part of this, so we're a bit of a trailblazer here in La Mesa. And the other cities are, I believe, San Diego, Chula Vista, Encinitas. I'm forgetting one, but there's one other one. So it's a big deal. We just added to our commission in the last month a new non-voting member to represent San Diego Community Power on our commission, so we can have communication back and forth between what the commission is doing and what the entity is also doing.
And so what would be the source of this power? Are they buying from SDG&E or?
That's a very good question. You know, I haven't had the chance to ask our community representative about that, but I do believe that is the case.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions for Andrea? It appears not.
Okay.
So thank you very much for filling us in on the important work that you're doing
Thanks for
on
the
behalf of the
opportunity,
Mesa.
Mitch.
And
Pleasure to see
have a good
everyone.
night.
It's been a great meeting.
all right. So moving on, next we have the usual reminder that if you have not paid your dues or your membership, please do so. I'm going to drop the URL in chat momentarily. Annual membership is so when we go back to live, we're going to have some more expenses than we have had. This is how we get this great programming out to you. And it's also, no, that's the wrong URL. That's for reporting an incident to the ADL, an equally important thing to do. But all right, so anyway, this is how we pay for all of what we do, getting this great programming out to you and getting Democrats elected in San Diego. And so next, we're going to make time for local leaders to talk about things that are important to know about. If you want to address the club for a minute or so, please raise your hand using the raise hand button on Zoom, or just leave a message in chat and we'll call on you and give you the floor for a minute or two. I know one or two people. Barrett Holman Leak, we'll start with you. I'm going to unmute you. My mouse pointer just doesn't want to move. There we go. All right, I've asked you to unmute.
Okay, I am unmuted. Hi, everyone. My name is Barrett Holman Leak, and I will be running in the 53rd, which will soon disappear and become maybe 52, district for U.S. House of Representatives in the 2022 midterm elections. So I am rooted in San Diego and East County, actually, Lemon Grove, for about 40 years. I did live a little while in La Mesa. And I have, basically, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I am Medicare for all, caring for the military families, gun violence prevention, so many of the things that you'll see most progressive Democrats are pushing for, especially in our climate change. So you'll see a lot more of me around, and I'll hold some town halls and help people to get to know me. I wanted to do this because rather than complain about what we have in Washington and what's going on, rather than just being upset about millionaires occupying the seats and not really voicing what's really going on in our community, that I would do something about it. I'd rather do something about it than just talk. I've been working since I was 12 years old, and I'll work until I drop.
Okay. Who I have to confess, I'm kind of a dummy and I don't keep track of the district numbers. Who currently represents in that district?
Sarah Jacobs.
Thought so. All right. So we have some opposition there. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For joining us. All right. And our next speaker is going to be Michigan, who is running for La Mesa City Council. So I've unmuted you, Michigan, so go ahead and speak. Thought I did. A little technical difficulty here, 7514. You are still muted, Michigan. Oh, there we go.
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you so
yes,
much.
Can hear you now. Good.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. My apologies, I'm not on the regular Zoom call. I'm actually out of town for my sister's graduation from dental school, and I'm not able to get decent Wi-Fi out here. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for these amazing presentations this evening. I myself, as a woman of color and working within the civil rights arena, know how much we as a community have to face, and really the obstacles that are before us in the coming year, with people all the way from, you know, the Proud Boys to Defend East County. There are so many different types of groups that we need to still continue to push back against and continue to dismantle this, you know, misogynist white supremacy that's really overtaken some parts of our county, unfortunately. As a civil rights activist, as a person from La Mesa, and having grown up in La Mesa and gone to middle school and high school in La Mesa, I think it's very important for the next candidate that replaces Dr. Akilah Weber understand the policy, the progressive policy changes that we need to have make happen, as well as make sure that they understand the political process and, espouse those really critical progressive democratic values. And I've been doing that for about 20 years. And I look forward to reconnecting with everybody when I come back to town. And I look forward to also doing some virtual meet and greets. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, feel free to please add me on Facebook at Mijgan Afshan or on Instagram at Mijgan Advocates. And or you can be able to reach me at my email at mijgan.afshan@gmail.com. And thank you so much. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Okay, we had a question on how to spell your name. So could you spell that for us,
Sure,
please?
it's spelled M as in Mary, E as in eyes, J as in Jerry, G as in golf, A as in apple, N as in Nancy. That's Mijgan. And the last name is Afshan. A as in apple, F as in Frank, S as in Sally, H as in house, A as in apple, N as in Nancy. Afshan.
Thank you, Mijgan.
Thank you.
All right, so next up, we're going to hear from Doug Case.
Good evening. My name is Doug Case, and I am the Political Affairs Director for Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins. You may have seen in this morning's paper that the legislature, the Assembly, and the Senate have come to a united agreement on the legislative budget. They now have to negotiate that with the governor. Fortunately, this year we have a lot more money than we did last year when we were facing a $54 billion deficit. This year we had $76 billion more than originally anticipated in revenue, plus $25 billion that came from the federal government. And so we're able to make some transformational proposals with regard to childcare, education, higher education, healthcare, homelessness, climate change, wildfires, drought, and others. And I don't have time in my 1 minute to go over all those, but I put in the chat a link that gives all the details about the legislative version of the budget. And if you're interested, I encourage you to download it and get all the details. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. Next, we're going to hear from Tommy Howe. As soon as I press the right button here. Buttons. Oh, here we go. The buttons are not cooperating tonight. Tommy, you're on.
Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate it. San Diego County Planning Commissioner Tommy Howe, running for San Diego City Council in District 6, which includes Sorrento Valley and Miramar, Eastern Claremont, Mira Mesa, where I live, also Kearney Mesa, and the southern two neighborhoods of Rancho Penasquitos. Many of you know I'm the co-founder of San Diego County Democrats for Environmental Action, and I was the endorsed Democratic candidate for the D6 seat for San Diego City Council in 2018. Since I last spoke with you, we had our Claremont Community Forum, had a great turnout for that, had about 35 people there, including some business owners and restaurateurs who were literally stopping in and making comments and asking questions in between serving their patrons. I was working with the Supervisor Lawson Reamer's office on getting support together locally. It wasn't too terribly hard for the epicenter in Mira Mesa, this teen center, to be transferred from the city to the county. It fell into disrepair about 5 years ago because the city couldn't find a new operator. So it's great news that the county will wind up taking over operation of this. Was happy to do that. As an environmentalist, I've fought to protect the Del Mar Mesa Preserve. I advocated for the ban on single-use plastics. I advocated for countywide Measure A that was going to stop sprawl throughout the county. I was instrumental in ensuring what became the City of San Diego's Climate Action Plan passed through our county Democratic Party. Having seen Peter on here, I'm proud to say that I was endorsed by the Sierra Club during the 2018 cycle. And I'll conclude by simply saying that I'm running because for far too long, our District 6 communities in the city of San Diego haven't had anyone rolling up their sleeves and fighting for us at City Hall. It hasn't been happening. We need streetlights. We need our roads rebuilt. We need our libraries restored. We have decades of deferred maintenance with our parks. And downtown, well, they just can't quite see the 140,000 people who live in our neighborhoods. And they have a hard time seeing beyond the economic centers of Miramar and Sorrento Valley and the Convoy area. But we are the heart of San Diego. We are the heart of San Diego and the residents who make this city work. And we certainly need some better support and some better representation at City Hall than we currently have. My name is Tommy Hough. My last name is spelled Hough. My website is tommyhough.com. And with your permission, Mr. President, I'll drop my information in the chat. Very nice to see everyone. And as with everyone else, I really appreciated the presentations tonight. Outstanding roster of speakers.
Well, thank you for joining us, Tommy. I am not the president of anything, but you are welcome to drop your information in the chat.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you. And now the last hand I see raised here is Jack Shu. So if anybody else wants to speak who's not Jack, please hit that raise hand button so I can see you. Other than that, Jack, take it away.
Thank you, Mitch. Last Friday, the SANDAG released its next regional transportation plan for the environmental review, the draft EIR. It is a very large document. It's huge. It's even and hard to understand in some ways. But there's a lot of misinformation that's being broadcast by our conservative members of SANDAG board. One of them is that SANDAG proposed to raise taxes on every mile that you drive, so that we can fund more transit. That's not really true. We are already paying every mile you drive with a car. You're paying some mileage fee, road use fee, but it's not paying for the system well enough, and that's through our gas tax. So my fellow board members on SANDAG on the other side, on the conservative side, is really pushing a lot of false information to try to kill that part of that plan that calls for building more transit what we need and stop building freeways. We really can't afford to do that. And they're also using, unfortunately, sometimes they'll pull the race card. They did that on even legislation at the state level, like AB 1139 that deals with solar panels. We really have to be careful, and for all the Democrats, not to be at least taken by these ideas that some of these environmental actions, which is going to help fight climate change, are racist in any way. If we will look at climate change itself affects people of color and poor people a lot more. We need to deal with climate change, and these actions like AB 1139 and the SANDAG plan is going to deal with equity much better than we have now. What we have now is not equitable. So please keep that in mind, and please review the regional transportation plan when you have a chance, and support the changes that it's calling for. Thank you.
Thank you. So that does it for tonight. Thanks for staying with us, everybody, and we hope to see you soon in real life. We expect to see you soon in real life, hopefully in August. Join us for our next meeting until then, which is Wednesday, July 7th. Usual time, 7 p.m. for the programming and 6:30 p.m. for the unstructured chat. Look for a replay of this meeting on our YouTube channel. Just search for the Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club on YouTube and subscribe while you're there. That'll be available just as soon as I get around to doing it. Also look for links to this video on our website, Facebook page and group and Twitter account, and in our email update soon. Again, as soon as I can get to that. The website is lamesa-foothillsdemocratic-club.com, or if that is too much for you to type, lmfdems.com. The Facebook page and group have the same name as the club. We have a page and a group because Facebook makes no sense. On Twitter, we're LMFDems, and if you want to sign up for our email updates, go to the website and look for Get Email Updates link at the top of the page. Thank you to my fellow board members for all their hard work arranging this meeting, and also thanks to our guests and candidates, and to you for spending some of our valuable time with us. Also, thanks to our elected officials. Good night, everybody. Stay healthy, stay sane, and we'll see you again soon. And to my wife, if you're still watching on YouTube, hi again, Julie. I'll be out of my office soon, and we can watch some TV and have a snack. Tonight's TV is the next episode of For All Mankind.